In a factory, the boss is the top dog, calling the shots and deciding what types of products are made when. He or she tells the workers how much of each product to make, and even hires and fires employees. Sometimes, he or she might need more assembly line workers, and other times, a bigger janitorial staff. A similar process takes place inside cells when we view them under a microscope. In the microscopic world, cells are bossed around by DNA, which is short for deoxyribonucleic acid. In cells like ours, the DNA has a special office, just like a boss does. It's called the nucleus. Animal cells, plant cells, and fungi have a nucleus. However, bacteria and viruses do not. Their bosses just have a desk in the factory, not an office. In this lesson, we're going to look specifically at animal cells. Animal cells are eukaryotic, meaning they have a nucleus. They don't have a cell wall, and are part of bigger multicellular organisms, like people. To understand what the nucleus does in the cell, let's first examine its structure. The nucleus has an outer barrier called the nuclear envelope, or nuclear membrane, surrounding it. Just like an envelope surrounding a letter, the nuclear envelope contains all the important information in the nucleus. The nucleoplasm is a thick gel that fills the inside of the nucleus. Inside the nucleoplasm are large structures called nucleoli. Nucleoli are like tiny factories that make important parts of the cell, called ribosomes. We'll look more at this process later. Since the nucleus makes things, the nucleus must ship materials in and products out. The doors of the nucleus are called nuclear pores. Nuclear pores serve as gateways, selectively allowing things in and out of the nucleus. Since the nucleus contains so many important things, substances in the cell must possess special tags in order for them to enter the nucleus. Think of these special tags as the keycards necessary to gain entrance into a very important building. Now that we know how the nucleus looks, let's look at what it does for the cell. The nucleus has one main job. It keeps the DNA safe from the rest of the cell. Why must DNA be kept safe? DNA is the basis of the genetic code that directs all of a cell's operations. The nuclear envelope and nuclear pores protect the DNA in the nucleus. They keep things that should not be in the nucleus out and let things that are needed in. Since DNA is so important, it's not just inside the nucleus floating around. There's a specific way the nucleus stores DNA, just like you would store special photographs in a nice picture album, instead of tossing them inside a box. DNA is stored inside chromatin in a cell that isn't dividing. Although chromatin looks like a thick mess when viewed through a microscope, the DNA is carefully wound like a string around tiny proteins that resemble beads. The resulting structures, called nucleosomes, fold up to form loops, which are then compressed into tight chromatin coils. This method of storing the DNA enables the nucleus to organize the DNA and fit so much of it into a tiny space. The nucleus uses the nucleolus to make new ribosomes, or protein factories for a cell, when the cell needs them. Ribosomes are needed to make proteins outside the nucleus. Since proteins are needed for every single function in the cell, ribosomes have a very important job. Sometimes, cells need to make copies of the master plans of a cell, or the DNA. When a cell needs to divide or make a copy of itself, maybe so an animal can grow or a wound can heal, it must make a copy of the DNA first. We wouldn't build a new factory without having another boss to run it. Special proteins copy the DNA, and then the cell splits it into two new cells, both of which have identical DNA. Other times, a cell needs to copy the DNA, so the ribosomes know what proteins to build. The message of the DNA is copied to messenger RNA, or mRNA, molecules. The mRNA is then sent from the nucleus through the nuclear pores to the ribosomes. The mRNA serves as instructions for the ribosome, so it can build the proteins the cell needs at that moment. The mRNA tells the ribosomes which amino acids must join together to make specific proteins. As the ribosomes click along the mRNA, They link the correct amino acids that transfer RNA, tRNA, brings to the ribosomes. Each tRNA molecule brings a specific amino acid to the ribosome. The result is protein products made to fulfill the specific orders given by the DNA in the nucleus. Let's review. Eukaryotic cells have a nucleus that contains DNA, the boss of a cell. Animal cells are eukaryotic cells that don't have a cell wall and are part of larger, multicellular organisms. The nucleus organizes and protects the DNA. Inside the nucleus are structures called nucleoli that make ribosomes, the protein factories outside the nucleus. DNA is duplicated in the nucleus when a cell needs to divide for the purpose of growth or repair. The nucleus also copies DNA to make messenger RNA, mRNA, which contains the instructions the ribosomes need to make the correct proteins. Transfer RNA, tRNA, brings the specific amino acids to the ribosomes to make the needed proteins.